Today, you're going to do some of your first focused thinking about theme as it appears in the short story that you're studying. And I'm going to give you a few tips for how to do that. But before we even get to those tips, I think it's worth asking the question, what are we talking about when we're talking about theme? Because it's a really simple idea in many ways, but it can get kind of complicated because of the way that people use the term. Basically, what I mean is that you'll hear people throw the word theme around a lot, but it often means a couple different things. Let me give you an example of what I mean. When most people are talking about theme, they're just talking about the thematic topic. So, if whether you're thinking about, a Taylor Swift album or a season of Peaky Blinders or the short story you're writing, when people say, "What are some themes in that work?" they're thinking of just ideas that come up in that story or in that text. So when I'm saying theme really loosely, I often just mean a topic, really. What do you think the work is generally about? Thematic topic is usually just one word or short phrase, but it's more abstract or general. Some examples of thematic topics would be isolation, cowardice, faith, obsession, or growing up. And you might notice that a book, an album, they could have more than one of these thematic topics coming up a lot across them, right? But when we're talking about studying something, and again, this can be that same Taylor Swift album, it can be that same season of Peaky Blinders, it can be a novel in your university lit class, or it could be the short story in your eighth grade language arts class. Then, when we're talking about theme, we're often talking about a thematic statement. And this is what the reader thinks the work says about those topics or ideas that were listed here. When we're talking about theme in this sense, then usually it needs to be like a full statement, a full sentence, and it's more specific. And really, it's the message or the argument that the author or the text seems to be making. And again, this is the reader's interpretation. So there's no 100% correct answer. We don't need to call up the author and ask them what's the message that they want us to get from their story, what's the argument that they're making. It's what we pick up through reading the text closely. When we're trying to express what we think that kind of a theme is, the thematic statement is, then we need to express it as a full sentence usually. And it's usually a statement about life, living, or human nature. So let's talk about it, thinking maybe of some examples. Let's say that you've read two novels recently, and both of them in your mind cover the theme of love, right? The thematic topic of love. If you wanted to get into thematic statements, well, a theme in one of those two novels, which was about love, could be love, if taken to extremes, can be negative rather than positive. You can imagine a story that left you with that idea or understanding of its message. And the other book that you read right after it, also about love, might leave you with this idea that love can conquer even the greatest evil. Two totally different takes on the topic of love, but both about the theme of love. Here's a story, a novel, a movie that many of you guys have read or seen before, The Fault in Our Stars. That's about a book. That is a book about a young teenage girl who's been diagnosed with lung cancer. She meets and falls in love with a fellow cancer patient. The topics that come up in that, in terms of thematic topics, love, death, suffering, coming of age, courage, pain, and probably others. The thematic statement, or I should say, one thematic statement that many readers get out of it, is that pain is inevitable, but it's a necessary part of joy. So you see, You can identify lots of topics, but it takes a little bit more thinking to come up with what the work is actually saying about any of those topics. All Summer in a Day, the short story we just read about Margot on Venus. What are some possible thematic topics in that short story? Again, these would just be one word ideas, abstract or general, that come up in that story. What do you think? If you're at home watching this, maybe pause it and see if you can't brainstorm a few. Try to guess what's going to come up on the screen. Here's what students usually come up with: bullying, sure. Loneliness, yep. Fitting in, jealousy, hope, and plenty more. You probably came up with one on your own that's not on this list. Now, if I'm writing about All Summer in a Day, which I do intend to do, I need to start thinking about these topics and start narrowing down which topics really stand out to me, because that's going to help me come up with the kind of interpretation of the story that I want to make. But this is the first step, coming up with some possible topics. What about in your short story? What are some possible thematic topics in that story that you've identified so far? Try to brainstorm a full list of them. I would just add that list as a comment at the bottom of your story. Don't worry about getting it right at this point. There is no right answer right now. And if some of them are a bit of a reach, that's okay. Sometimes the ones that feel like reaches end up actually being pretty powerful. So put those down as well. Having a good list is going to help you with the next steps. So we'll stop there. Again, you can go back through this if you want, but your job right now is to brainstorm that list of possible topics. Go for it.